The semiconductor industry is no longer just about technology. It's about national security, geopolitics, and the future of global markets. From Washington to Beijing, from Arizona to Shenzhen, chips have become the new oil, the essential resource powering AI, defense, and the digital economy. And for investors, semiconductor stocks are no longer just tied to product launches or consumer demand. They're tied to tariffs, treaties, and trade wars. Today, we're exploring the future of U.S. semiconductor stock prices, both native American companies and non-native foreign firms, in the era of onshoring, Trump's re-election, and China's drive for self-sufficiency. The chessboard is shifting. And the stakes are nothing less than the future of the world's most valuable industry. Part 1 is about the onshoring experiment, or some calls it a revolution. The cornerstone of America's semiconductor push remains the CHIPS and Science Act of 2022. It's a $52 billion bet on industrial policy, subsidies, tax credits, and grants to build fabrication plants and R&D hubs in the U.S. The goal? End reliance on fragile Asian supply chains and secure America's technological future. Winners in the short term: Intel, pouring billions into new fabs in Arizona and Ohio, all with government backing. Micron, betting on domestic memory production. Applied Materials and Lam Research, supplying the critical equipment to make those fabs run. Their order books remain full, and Wall Street has noticed. For these native U.S. firms, stock prices have been buoyed by subsidies and guaranteed demand. It has been bullish. But the risks haven't disappeared. Fabs are complex and expensive. Labor shortages, cost overruns, and delays are real. If American fabs continue to cost significantly more than their Asian counterparts, even subsidies may not be enough to sustain global competitiveness. Investors may face disappointment 5 to 10 years out. And what about the non-native firms? TSMC and Samsung are already building in Arizona and Texas, investing tens of billions. They're receiving CHIPS Act funding and are treated like indispensable allies. This U.S. footprint has supported their stock valuations. Yet the long-term dilemma is sharper than ever. Can they remain global companies serving both China and the U.S., or will geopolitics force them to pick sides? If forced to choose, their margins and global reach could collapse. So far, the onshoring trend has been a powerful tailwind for the entire semiconductor sector. The PHLX Semiconductor Index has consistently outperformed broader markets since the CHIPS Act passed. But the costs, and the inflationary pressures, are still working their way through the system. In Part 2, we discuss the re-emergence of President Trump. The elephant in the room is no longer hypothetical. Trump is back, and he has reshaped global trade. His administration has implemented sweeping tariffs on Chinese imports, in some cases exceeding 60%. For the semiconductor supply chain, deeply intertwined with Asia, the shock was immediate. Costs surged, supply chains buckled, and semiconductor stocks initially plunged. Markets adapted quickly. Panic selling dominated headlines in the first weeks, but within months, investors recalibrated. Subsidies, defense demand, and forced capital reallocation into U.S. semiconductor champions provided powerful support. By September 2025, the S&P 500 and the PHLX Semiconductor Index have not only recovered, they've hit all-time highs. The winners are U.S.-based equipment makers like Applied Materials and Lam Research as America doubles down on domestic fabs. Defense-linked chip suppliers, riding Trump's military buildup, are also seeing robust demand. The losers are Qualcomm and other firms with heavy China exposure face margin pressures and slower growth. TSMC, straddling both worlds, remains under constant geopolitical strain. Yet the biggest cost is volatility itself. Constant swings in tariff rules and export bans inject uncertainty into valuations. Strangely, the market has now become desensitized because of the taco effect. For investors, the new normal is a semiconductor industry inseparable from geopolitics, and a market that rewards resilience to policy shocks as much as technical innovation. Part 3 is about China's ecosystem, competition, and policy onslaught. To fully understand the pressure on the U.S. industry, we must look not just at China's goals, but at the formidable, state-orchestrated engine it has built to achieve them. This isn't just a few companies, it's an entire integrated system. Let us discuss China's hardware and software industrial complex, hardware ecosystem. Beyond SMIC and YMTC, China is building a complete supply chain. Equipment, companies like Nara and SMIC are developing domestic alternatives to Applied Materials and Lam Research for etching, deposition, and cleaning tools. While generations behind, in semiconductor parlance, they are capturing the massive domestic market, forced to buy Chinese. Design and IP feature Huawei's high silicon, which is the flagship, but countless smaller firms design chips for everything from AI to Internet of Things. They are using architecture from RISC-V, which is an open-source alternative to ARM, which bypasses US control. This is critical for escaping Western IP dominance. Materials. Efforts are underway to domesticize the production of silicon wafers, specialty gases, and photoresists, reducing reliance on Japanese and European suppliers. Software ecosystem. Hardware is useless without the software to run it. China is building its own digital world. Operating systems. Harmony OS, Huawei's alternative to Android and OpenOiler, for servers, are being aggressively deployed to create a viable ecosystem divorced from Google and Microsoft. Cloud and AI. Companies, such as Alibaba Cloud, Tencent Cloud, and Baidu are developing full-stack AI solutions. Their chips like the Baidu Kunlun AI processor to cloud platforms and large language models, LLMs, that are entirely domestic. Industrial software. The development of Chinese-made ADA, electronic design automation, tools from companies like Empyrean is a top priority to break the Synopsys/Cadence/Siemens ADA oligopoly. Fierce domestic competition. The narrative of a monolithic China Incorporated is misleading. The state provides the direction and capital, but the execution is fiercely competitive. Dozens of chip designers, manufacturers, and equipment makers are vying for subsidies from the big fund and contracts from state-owned enterprises. This internal competition, while sometimes inefficient, drives rapid iteration and improvement. The success of Huawei's 7nm chip was a shock not just to the West, but also to domestic competitors like SMIC, spurring them to innovate more rapidly. 1. China's policy toolkit is a multi-trillion-dollar war chest in response to the US CHIPS Act is a $52 billion response. The Big Fund, the National Integrated Circuit Industry Investment Fund, has poured tens of billions of dollars into domestic companies across the supply chain, from design to packaging. 2. Below-market financing. State-owned banks provide enormous, low-interest loans to champion companies, effectively softening the risk of high cost of R&D and capex. 3. Forced import substitution. Government and state-owned enterprises are mandated to prioritize domestic chips and software, creating a guaranteed market. This provides the revenue and real-world testing needed to improve. 4. Guidance to private tech. Giants like Alibaba and Tencent are strongly encouraged to invest billions in semiconductor startups and to source from domestic suppliers in their data centers and products. 5. Aggressive talent acquisition. Programs like the 1,000 Talents Plan have historically targeted Western-trained engineers and scientists to bring knowledge back to China. While tightened controls have slowed this, the focus on building domestic talent pipelines is intense. This Chinese system directly threatens the US and its allies in 3 profound ways. 1. Erosion of the moats. The entire Western semiconductor model is built on deep competitive moats, IP, complex software, EDA, and ultra-advanced equipment. China's state-backed import substitution directly attacks these moats. If Chinese companies are forced to use domestic ADA tools and equipment, within a decade, they will improve them to a level where they are viable outside China. This creates future global competitors for Applied Materials, Synopsys, and ASML in mid-tier nodes. 2. The legacy nodes become a commodity. While the US focuses on cutting-edge AI chips at 3 nanometers and 5 nanometers, the vast majority of the world's chips are made on legacy nodes, 28 nanometers and above. They power cars, appliances, weapon systems, and industrial equipment. China is flooding this market. Over 50% of global capacity for these nodes comes from China. Chinese fabs can undercut everyone on price. This threatens the profitability of Western analog chipmakers, such as Texas Instruments, NXP, Infineon, and undermines the economic viability of new US fabs focused on these nodes. 3. The China standard for the Global South. Nations frustrated with US conditions may adopt China's tech stack. This doesn't just mean buying Huawei phones. It means adopting Harmony OS, running apps on Alibaba Cloud, and utilizing Chinese industrial equipment that utilizes Chinese-made chips. This locks these countries into China's ecosystem for decades, permanently excluding US companies from these future growth markets. Part 4 is about inflation, consumers, and global spillovers. Here's where economics comes full circle. If chips and electronics are produced in the US at a higher cost, and imports are tariffed, US consumers foot the bill. Prices of phones, cars, laptops, and even home appliances all rise. That stokes inflation. It is politically toxic. The second Trump term built on tariffs could quickly backfire as voters face higher living costs. That creates pressure for a future administration, Republican or Democrat, to reverse policy. And let's not forget spillovers. U.S. export licensing doesn't just target China. It complicates sales to third-party markets, such as India, Indonesia, or Saudi Arabia, if Washington fears re-exports. That uncertainty pushes countries toward Beijing's alternative system, further shrinking the U.S. market. The world of one unified, hyper-efficient semiconductor supply chain is gone. What's left is fragmentation, duplication, and inefficiency. For stock prices, that means lower margins, slower innovation, and less room for growth. The tech Iron Curtain solidifies, so where does this leave investors? The picture is now more complex, and the long-term risks are even higher. Near term, next 2 to 3 years. Bullish, but with new caveats. Government subsidies provide a powerful floor. However, investors must watch for profit warnings from US and European analog/legacy chipmakers as Chinese competition intensifies and price wars begin. Medium term, next administration. Highly volatile and bifurcated. Sweeping tariffs would cause immediate pain, but the real story is one of sector-specific impacts. Defense-linked and advanced equipment stocks may shine. However, companies exposed to the legacy node market will face immense pressure from Chinese competitors. The non-native firms, TSMC, Samsung, will be squeezed not just by geopolitics, but also by Chinese price competition in their core memory and foundry businesses. Long term, 5 to 10 years. Structurally cautious. The rise of China's parallel system doesn't just cap US growth, it actively challenges it in the majority of the semiconductor market, legacy nodes. Global fragmentation means higher costs, slower innovation, and the emergence of well-subsidized, strategic competitors. Valuations for the entire sector must reset to account for permanently lower global market share and thinner margins. The moats that built the industry are under direct assault. The semiconductor industry is at the epicenter of a clash between two fundamentally different economic systems, a market-driven model versus a state-directed, mercantilist engine. For investors, it's no longer just about chips or geopolitics, it's about picking which system will prevail in which domains of technology. The side a company falls on, and the market it serves, will decide not just its market, but its market cap. And here's the kicker, export controls designed to hurt China are pushing countries outside the West to its side. Nations in Southeast Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, frustrated by US tariffs, restrictions, and licensing, may choose the Chinese stack. Why? It's cheaper. It's accessible. And it comes without Washington's conditions. For US firms, this is devastating. The global semiconductor market is splitting into two. One US-led, one China-led. The total addressable market for US companies shrinks. Growth rates flatten. And stock valuations, especially the lofty PE multiples of Nvidia and AMD, come under pressure. For non-native firms like ASML in the Netherlands or Samsung in Korea, the future is just as risky. They could lose access to either market, forced to pick a side. Their stocks become geopolitical weather vanes. And don't forget, necessity drives innovation. By cutting China off, the US is fueling China's determination to catch up. So what do you think? Can the US innovation model withstand China's full-spectrum pressure, or will market fragmentation and cost pressures ultimately give Beijing the advantage? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe for more deep dives into the future of global markets.